I've been on a lifelong journey for self-discovery. And so I felt like I had a full suite of tools to help me. And about 5 years ago, I hit a series of really rough transitions. I was using all of the tools I had at my disposal to help me. And they were certainly working because I practiced them, but I was not feeling any lightness in my soul. I was grinding my way through it. And I got exposed to art journaling through a colleague at the time. And I went to her little workshop and I just had so much fun playing with the paints and the colors. And what it did is it helped me discover joy again and play that lightness of spirit, that joy. And that day, it was just pure play again. And I wanted to do it again and again and again.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about the art of resilience. I'm delighted to welcome Susan Hensley. Susan is a transformational coach, speaker, and author who empowers people to navigate life with joy and resilience. You can reach Susan at her website, susanhensley.com, and I'll include that link in the show notes. Welcome, Susan. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Oh, Linda, I am thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me. I so enjoy your podcast, Linda's Corner. I found so much value in it for myself personally. There's so many great tools and approaches to helping us live our best lives. So thank you.
Thank you for saying that. That makes me so happy. And I love that there is a variety of ways to do things and that we can find the tool that works for us, that resonates for us. And the process of healing, the process of resilience can be joyful. And it can really, I think that matters because especially if we're in a place of we're hurting, we're struggling. And it feels like if I'm going to get out of this, I have to do something different and it's going to be miserable and I don't want to, then we stay where we are. And your tools are very special because they're very specifically designed to not be boring, to be exciting. So let's talk about art journaling. Can you tell us what it is and how you have used it?
Sure. I'll start with the second part first with how I used it. And just a little bit of background is I've been on a lifelong journey, right, for self-discovery. And so I felt like I had a full suite of tools to help me when I discovered art journaling. I have a deep faith, so I've always used prayer, meditation, journaling. I've had some really terrific therapists over the years. So I had all these tools. And about 5 years ago, I hit a series of really rough transitions, as we all do, right? I mean, it's life. You know how won't be just one thing. It'll be two, three, and four. And I got exposed to art journaling through a colleague at the time. And she actually had learned art and was teaching us art skills. I went to her little workshop and I just had so much fun playing with the paints and the colors. And what it did is it helped me discover joy again and play because I was using all of the tools I had at my disposal to help me. And they were certainly working because I practiced them, but I was not feeling any lightness in my soul, I was grinding my way through it, that lightness of spirit, that joy. And that day, other people were actually learning about proportions and how to do things. And I made like a brown mess on my page and I loved it. It was so, it was just pure play again. And I went home that day and I wanted to do it again and again and again. And I very intuitively went to a local store, the kids section, bought crayons, the glue stick. Anyone who's a parent out there has been there, right? You know, the watercolors, all the stuff that washes out if you make a mess. Didn't spend very much money. And I just started to layer in a few minutes 10 minutes a day into my other things of playing with art, collaging, and I really found it lit me up. It started to be a way for me, quite honestly, to hear back from my soul. I think many times my mind was so busy in our world of achievement and perfectionism, the lists of what you need to do, right? And I had to get through these transitions with grace and perfection, whether it was navigating healthcare systems or challenges at work. And the art journal was just fun. And I would step back and love the mess I had created. And it was a very natural affirmation started to come forward. And I wouldn't want to stop. And I was finding I was getting relief in just 10 minutes a day. And it helped all my other tools, quite honestly, work better. We then hit the darn pandemic and where you really couldn't connect as much with people. And boy, did art journaling really become a lifeline during that point of fun, when there wasn't much fun, of processing fear and messages. So my discovery of it was really extremely accidental. It wasn't after I had done it for several years that I then started to study what it was. I started to read about our brains on art because I got really curious. I learned about the left brain to the right brain, and it all clicked as to what my art journal had really been doing for me. And so that's a bit the way I came into it. Do you want me to go to the very first part of your question? Because it was two parts and I haven't touched what
Yes,
art journal.
absolutely. I would love to hear the rest of the answer.
Okay, thank you. So what the art journaling is for me, and I want to be very careful that there are a series of artists out there who use art journaling to improve their skills, right? This is not that. The way I talk about art journaling is really about a tool for self-discovery, a tool for processing emotions. So it's, for me, a very basic journal. You choose your favorite artistic mediums, whatever they were as a kid. Think of the point before you received any messages in your life about your creativity, whatever age that was. For me, I really find it like 4 to 6, where I felt creative. And those were the tools that I've used. And it's about spending a few minutes each day. I would start with 10 minutes and processing what's there. What feels good? Spread out your crayons, take out your watercolors, use magazines and collage. And you can ask yourself a question. And in the book, we sort of walk through a series of prompts if you're not sure where to start. In workshops, I sometimes, and these are just people sitting there listening, I'll do a 5-minute exercise. Everyone, as they came in, will have chosen two crayons. And I'll say, just fill this page for 5 minutes. Draw whatever you want. Think of what you drew as a kid. What did you doodle? People drew rabbits, shapes, houses, trees, right? Little kids just draw whatever. And you spend just 5 minutes, and the instructions are fill the page. And all of a sudden the 5 minutes ends and we will debrief the process, and people can't believe how fast time went by, how much fun they had, how they didn't want to stop. And so in that sense, that's what you're doing at home as you learn to art journal. And both in the book and an online course, it's really initially helping people figure out what are the mediums that speak to them, and keeping it really playful. This is not a place for self-criticism. I joke that your inner art critic is not invited to this play date. It really just starts with the play date with yourself.
I love that. And as you're describing this process and rediscovering joy, and it's fascinating, as in your story, you had an excellent set of tools to be able to help process the things that were going on in your world. And yet, it sounds like one element was missing, and that was fun, play, joy. And these things matter. I think sometimes as adults, we don't give ourselves permission to play because we think, okay, now I've got to work, and anything that I'm doing to play is a waste of time. But it's so funny Even the same people who think that don't have any problem spending minutes to hours scrolling through Facebook or social media and don't count that as wasting time. But if I'm doing something that I know is going to bring me joy, I'm not allowed. I'm not allowed to do that. So let's go ahead and give everyone who's listening permission to have joy, to play. And I love that you put it in little bite-sized pieces, 10 minutes, because that's another thing that we struggle with as adults. We're busy. We don't have time. Don't ask me to do anything more in my day. It's full. But now I can stop for 10 minutes that I could have been scrolling through social media and I can play. And it's okay if I end up with a brown blob or with something else that's not going to be in an art gallery somewhere. I'm just playing. Isn't that magical? I love that.
Linda, I so appreciate the way you said that, because that is exactly what was missing, right? I was working full time. I was raising a family. There were people in my life with health issues, and everything was about being better or then numbing, right? I think of the scrolling of social media as numbing, and nothing was releasing the joy. And it was really an accident. And I consider it just a tremendous blessing in my life that I discovered it, because once you realize 10 minutes, and I'll tell you the first days I did this, I'm a fan of oatmeal, but I like the slower cook. So it takes a few minutes for the water to boil and for the oatmeal to boil. I actually started fitting the art journaling in while I was making my family breakfast. And instead of watching the pot boil, the proverbial pot boil, I had the crayons there and a little bit of watercolor, and it would just be to the side on the countertop, and I would do it. But it was fun, and I would keep doing it. So I really even came into it in a way that was like, I'm not even going to take 10 minutes. I'm just not going to watch the pot boil or pick up the phone and scroll social media while I wait for water to boil. Now I set aside time, but when I started 5+ years ago, it was really just squeezing it in the way anytime you'd sort of pick up your phone when you're stopped. I now carry a few crayons or gel pens in my purse with a little notebook, and I do regularly use color and shapes versus scrolling. I still scroll. I just want to be clear, but the difference in the feeling when I scroll, which is numbing and sometimes provokes, feelings, quite honestly, of not being enough, versus when you create, even if you're doing smiley faces, hearts, the simplest thing, it's you creating and processing, and it's taking back some of that agency. But really, the play has just been, for me, a real bridge to a different layer of self-discovery.
That is so beautiful. And I love that you've brought up a couple times that social media has a purpose. And part of the purpose is not just connection, it's actually numbing. It is a coping skill or a coping method that many people use so they don't have to feel. And the funny thing is, it kind of numbs and it kind of makes us feel like we're not good enough. So it has, for many people, a kind of a detrimental effect. And I love that you found time even during oatmeal. I mean, that wasn't even extra time. That was, you were there anyway. You chose an alternate activity than watching water boil. How many of us
Exactly.
have activities like that we don't even think of? Brilliant. So brilliant. Okay. So we've talked so far about that this is fun, that this is something that we can give ourselves permission. Now let's go a little deeper and talk about the power of it. Because sometimes, again, we're busy. And if you're giving me permission to play, I appreciate that. But does it do me any good? And so let's go a little deeper. And I'm sure you're going to cover this, but what I found fascinating as I was preparing for this today is that the military uses art therapy to help soldiers process PTSD, because sometimes returning soldiers have a difficult time putting into words the trauma that they have faced and have dealt with, that they were completely unprepared for. But when they are able to draw it out or paint it out, they're able to get some of those experiences that have been trapped and bothering them out. And then they're able to begin healing. And I thought that that was so beautiful, because sometimes when I think of art therapy, I think of these awesome, and usually women who are hanging out at the craft store and finding cutesy things to make and do. And when I think of the soldiers, I think of strong, tough men and women who have been through hard things, and it works for them. So this expands my vision of what this looks like and who it applies to. So you've been researching. What else have you learned?
You're absolutely right, Linda. As you get into it, I find it's helpful because it's a tool that's going to meet you where you are, right? If you need some just stress reduction in play, it meets you there. That's its simplest form. What is so amazing about art for the really deep, difficult emotions that we don't have words for and that we don't know how to describe, or we don't even want to admit or revisit, is that as you have that page and you have the permission to create, and you're choosing colors and seeing what comes up. And quite honestly, I have seen people work through it, and what starts as shame and guilt and rage, and you're using the colors that may speak to you. Meaning it could be red or black or purple. The page, the art journal, is a safe container. Your feelings that can feel so out of control as they're circulating through you, and that you can't master them. If you think at the very heart of what PTSD is, it's being overtaken by these memories and these series of emotions and feelings. It is creating a safe container as they're using color, words, collage, whatever it may be, to hold that. And then you can step back, and all of a sudden there it is. And it's not as overwhelming. It's not scary. You haven't had a behavior that could be detrimental, right? It's very simplest. I'm going to pull back from the soldier. You're feeling rage, and instead perhaps of snapping at a spouse or a loved one, you process it effectively onto the page. All of a sudden there it is, drawing or laying there. It's just on a page, and that emotion moves through, right? We are not our emotions. And when we're caught in the throes of really deep emotions, it feels like we are them. They are us. And I think that's where art helps us separate and create and use the emotion in a way that you can see that it can create something. It's not all bad. It didn't hurt. You were able to process, and there it sits safely in this container. One of my very favorite entries from a very difficult time, and it was slashed, and it was filled with shame and rage and anger and emotions you couldn't process. Now I look at it with such a tender heart, because that's who I was that day, and that's what I was feeling that day. But I'm not those things. Those were just the emotions that had been triggered that day. And I think in your example, for people who are experiencing really deep research, in addition to the therapy they're going to do with, trained, licensed professionals, it just creates that safe spot to hold it, to express it, and then to step back and see, it isn't me, and I can work through these. And then over a period of time, one of the things that I've found really impactful as I've worked with groups is, as you do entry over entry, you start to see growth and you start to see resilience. And it takes the fear and the anxiety, and you see through the images and colors you're using that you are a survivor, that you can transcend. You are not defined by necessarily what happened to you. And that's where I think, as it becomes a daily practice and you can flip through and see the full spectrum, it can be really powerful in making a person appreciate, or reflecting sort of a mirror back of how resilient and how strong we actually are when we're in the throes of what feels like our most intense emotions.
Wow. Okay. So do you keep all of the pages? I mean, what does it look like to you? Is it in a notebook, like an actual journal? I mean, that might affect what medium you might choose. I'm not going to use watercolors. It'll spill all over the other pages. But and then so if I'm, let's see. So PTSD, which can come from many different forms. We've talked about military, but can also come from, say, sexual abuse or something like that. And maybe I have got on the page my rage, my shame, my helplessness, and this is in my colors and in whatever I've done to put up there. Then do you keep that or do you throw it away and say, I am releasing it completely?
So those are terrific questions, and you can do both. And I think that's really important depending on what you need and where you are and how you're working through this, with a licensed professional. The first part of the question, I have kept my journals. I put them in just a like 5x7. I get thick enough pages. And on my website, there's an art journaling starter guide, just quick tips that your audience can download. It's there. It's free. You go to the website, you download it. So I like just a journal. And what I have found is in some of the hardest images, with distance and time, when you look back, that's where the strength and growth is. But the key thing is that this is yours. There are so many things in life and in healing that you must go through the steps. And we can tell ourselves stories that we're failing at any step. And it's a process. It's a process. And I can't stress enough how important is that you honor what you need. If it feels great to burn it, to tear it up, you carefully burn it in the sink. There's lots of ceremony you can attach to that. That's what you do. If instead you want to keep it and see how far you've come, for me, I've kept the journals. And I can't tell you how much I enjoy going back and looking at how far I've come and different messages and images I've used over time. At one point, there was a career transition coming. There were women, I don't even know where all these pictures come from. You just have a few magazines and all of a sudden you find those women jumping off cliffs or looking at a cliff or looking down a cliff. And there's images of winding roads and doors. And so it's really interesting when you step back and you start to see some pattern recognition about what is it I'm hearing from myself, if you will, and my soul about where I am. And you can look back after doing this for a while and feel tremendous accomplishment and pride in it. So I've sort of separated, to your question about people who are doing really, really serious healings, victims of sexual assault, soldiers with PTSD, to how anyone can use it. And I think as long as you're coupling, if you're dealing with a really serious issue with, a mental health professional, I think there's many degrees of freedom. And it's another way to layer what I would say can really be a self-affirming process of how far you've come and help you appreciate your own resilience.
That's beautiful. And as I'm listening, I'm thinking about an analogy that I like to use about healing, and that it's not like flipping on a light switch where I go from dark to light instantly, or I go from miserable to joyful instantly. It's more like a sunrise. And the change from moment to moment might be small and imperceptible. I might not even notice it. But when you step back and say, oh, now it's light. Now I can see. I couldn't see before. And here you're suggesting that as you're saving your pages, you're able to see the process of that rising sun and say, wow, look where I've come. The things that I am doing are working and I am changing. So I can see that that could provide a real benefit if that's something that's going to be helpful. And I love that you give the permission of, well, what's working for you? And there isn't one right way. There is what's right for me. And I love where we talk about research, but I also love talking about me search. And me search is when you don't just hear it, you try it. Does that work for me? And so I think no matter how many wonderful ideas we hear, if we don't apply any of them, they aren't going to do us any good. But if we can do a little me search and try it and then say, oh, I really liked that. That really helped me. Like it did for you. It seemed to have grabbed you from the beginning of, oh, this one speaks to my soul. Then we can say, oh, well, give me some more ideas of how to really make this work for me. So I love it. I love all of the things. Let's see. Is there anything you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
Well, I just want to say your analogy of the sunrise is so appropriate because that is the journey. We just don't see how much brighter it is getting or our growth. And that is a beautiful way to think of the journal. And, probably in closing, this is a tool that is about me search. And I would, as we started, where it can start with joy and play in what I call our busy lives and overburdened and level of seriousness or anxiety that seems to be swirling around us at this particular time, to do a little me search into play and joy and have that be the spark or the breadcrumb that it can be worth following, because that it started with joy. It led very, very deep places. And as I've done workshops, you'll see how people go deep. But the entry point being, I need a little joy, I need a little play, can really be a profound entry point. And it's why in choosing sort of the subtitle of the book, if you will, the big one is Art for Your Sanity, but it's then Unleash Joy, right, to help you navigate life's transitions. So that would be what I'd just love to leave your audience with, is it's okay to have joy be the breadcrumb you follow into something that takes you much deeper.
Oh, I love that. And I think life should be joyful. And I think it can be joyful. And I appreciate you sharing a tool today that is a small, simple action step to help us to be able to grab onto that joy. It's available for you. It's available for me. It's available for all of us. Let's grab it. So thank you so much for visiting with me today, Susan.
Oh, thank you. My honor. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote from Very Well Mind, which says, expressing yourself through artistic and creative activities is like a prescription for your mental health. Today, I invite our listeners to tap into our creativity, to untangle our thoughts and improve our well-being. See you next time on Linda's Corner.
Thanks for listening. Please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. And if you'd like to heal your life from the inside out, there is a free video series at hopeforhealingfoundation.org. Just click on the free stuff tab. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.